Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I find myself in a rather unusual role of being a moderator for a press conference, but I think this is a special occasion where I really love to fulfill this role. My name is Jan Kickert. I'm the Austrian permanent representative to the United Nations, and it takes me great pleasure to welcome here the representatives of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. And the occasion is that they have received the Nobel Peace Prize for the year 2017. And it gives me special pride because Austria, with its partners, we have representatives here also from Brazil and Costa Rica, but also South Africa, Ireland, Nigeria, Mexico, have been at the forefront together with ICANN to push forward the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, which we were able to agree upon in July of this year by 122 member states. And without the energy of civil society bundled in the international campaign, we would not be where we are today. And I would like to really thank, from the point of view of a member state, the international campaign for its role in achieving this great treaty. And a little bit of pride I also take in the fact that the official launch of the campaign was done in Vienna, Austria, in 2007. And ever since, we have been, I would say, brothers and sisters in disarmament, and we will continue to do so. And with no further ado, I would like to ask first Beatrice Finn, the Executive Director of ICANN, to take the floor, and then her colleagues from ICANN following afterwards. Beatrice.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. Rushed to New York this weekend to meet with you and others here. It's really a great honor for ICANN to be awarded the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize. It was awarded in recognition of our role to bring about the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and to mobilize people all over the world to campaign against nuclear weapons. And this prize is really in honor of all of those people who have fought tirelessly against nuclear weapons, sometimes ignored, and very small organizations, lots of volunteers and committed people all over the world. So it's really in recognition of them. It's also in huge recognitions of Hibakusha, survivors of nuclear weapons, who have been instrumental in both ICANN and also in the development of this treaty as the foundation for why we're doing what we're doing. And it's also been really great for a new generation of campaigners, people that grew up after the Cold War that don't understand why we still have these weapons. So it's a really great honor for everyone around the world. This treaty has been it's a historic agreement. And really, as Setsuko Thurlow, survivor of Hiroshima, said at the 7th of July, marks the beginning of the end for nuclear weapons. So I think I'm going to leave immediately just to Ray to continue. Thank you.
Go ahead, yes.
Okay. Thanks very much. My name's Ray Atchison. I'm with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which is an international steering group member of ICANN. So ICANN is a global coalition made up of 468 organizations currently in 101 countries, although it seems that we're receiving a lot of new partnership requests over the weekend, so that number will probably increase. And WILP is the oldest women's organization in the world, and we brought a feminist perspective to ICANN. We have national sections in about 35 countries with members doing advocacy around the world, and that's just one organization amongst so many that have brought very unique skill sets and experiences and histories and abilities to this campaign. So this award really is something that we can all embrace as ICANN members around the world. And it's really also an award for diplomacy, for dialogue, for cooperation. At a time when we're seeing rising tensions in the world, I think it's more important than ever for us to be emphasizing the importance and the utility and the practicality of working together. There was a unique collaboration between civil society and governments to make the treaty happen. And I think that we can see this as an example that stems back to the days of banning landmines and cluster bombs and needs to continue forward in the way that we engage with the United Nations, as governments, as NGOs, and as international organizations working across a range of issues. This treaty is quite unique in the way that it deals with nuclear weapons as they have never been dealt with before. It was born from the considerations of the humanitarian impacts of nuclear weapons, the catastrophic effects, and the understanding that there would be no way for the international community to respond to even a single nuclear weapon detonation. And from this understanding, countries came together that are nuclear free, that have rejected nuclear weapons as an idea that they provide security for anybody. And they came together to say, what can we do in this environment where we do see more investments in nuclear weapons, rising tensions between nuclear armed states? And the result was a categorical prohibition of these weapons, outlawing all associated activities and providing an option for disarmament for the nuclear armed states if they decide to join in this normative and legal and social effort that we've made. Thank you.
Tim?
Tim Wright, the Asia Pacific Director of ICANN. This, of course, is a tremendous honour for us, and it came as quite a surprise to receive, I guess, the most prestigious award in the world. I was involved in setting up this campaign a little over a decade ago, and it was just a small group of us with a bold vision to establish a global prohibition on nuclear weapons. So it's quite remarkable to reflect on the progress that's been made since then. But of course, this is a moment of incredible tension globally. We have heard in recent weeks in this very building threats to use nuclear weapons. There are still more than 15,000 in existence around the world, and unless we work now to eliminate them, it's almost certain that they'll be used again. This treaty offers an alternative to a world in which threats of mass destruction are allowed to prevail. We hope that the award of the Nobel Peace Prize will help us in our campaigning to get countries to sign and ratify this vital international agreement. And we'll be working over coming weeks and months to persuade governments to do just that. I know that there are several members of the Japanese press here, so I'd like to make a specific comment about the Japanese government. We take this opportunity to renew our call to the Japanese government to sign and ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Its failure to do so is a betrayal of the Hibakusha, who for more than 70 years have worked tirelessly to eliminate nuclear weapons. They have issued a dire warning to humanity, and we must listen to their testimony and heed their call. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. And I have now the honor to call on my distinguished colleague, the PR of Costa Rica, Juan Carlos Mendoza Garcia.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Costa Rica joined the international community in congratulating ICANN in being granted the highest and most important award there is. We are really happy about it. It is a well-deserved recognition of ICANN's relentless efforts to nuclear disarmament. Their continuing and committed support was key in the process towards the success of the Ban Treaty process, and as we've been saying, we've been mentioning in numerous occasions, that this treaty is the result of a joint work and relentless efforts of the civil society and those who suffered the heartbreaking consequence of the use and testing of nuclear weapons. This is a treaty that we see as a debt that we had with humanity, and being ICANN awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for this work is a moment of a recognition that the treaty relevance will have, especially in these moments of time that we are having. In this moment, the world is facing the threat of the use of nuclear weapons. So we believe it's an important political sign for the change that is needed at this moment and the necessity for implementing fully the treaty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. I forgot to mention that Costa Rica was the country who was chairing the negotiations to reach the agreement, the Prohibition Treaty, and it was also the President of Costa Rica who spoke in the morning of the 20th of September opening the treaty for signing, and we are very happy that over 50 countries have signed immediately, and already 3 ratifications. As you may know, 50 ratifications and the treaty will enter into force. And I would now like to ask my colleague from Brazil, the permanent representative, Mauro Vieira, who represents a country which always was at the forefront in the fight against nuclear weapons. Mauro, please.
Thank you very much. I also would like to say that we are celebrating the Nobel Peace Prize awarded to ICANN since the very moment we got this great news. And the role that ICANN played, and together with other civil society organizations, were fundamental for the negotiation, and the support they gave changed the dynamics of the negotiation. We are very proud to be a country of Latin America. We proposed, and we had the support since the beginning, and worked together with Austria, Ireland, Mexico, Nigeria, and South Africa. We proposed the resolution that allowed the negotiation of this treaty. We were very happy to see a member, the presidency of the conference in the hands of the ambassador Elaine White from Costa Rica, from our region, and we are all members in our region in Latin America and the Caribbean of OPANAL, the Organization for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is a very important initiative too, because it was the first organization to establish the first treaty, the Tlatelolco Treaty, to establish a nuclear weapons-free zone in a highly populated region. And we are also very honored because Brazil was the first country to sign on September the 20th this treaty. It was signed by the President of Brazil, and we hope that ICANN's well-deserved Nobel Peace Prize will promote more signatures and ratifications of the treaty to bring about its swift entry into force. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'm entering uncharted territory. Please bear with me. Yes, I understood that that you have the privilege, but that I don't know you personally by name. So if you could introduce yourself and also your affiliation, and if your question is posed to a certain person, please go ahead.
Okay. Hello, my name is Shauna McGee from Kyoto News, and on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Associations, congratulations, we know you well, especially being with the Japanese media. I don't know who I addressed this particular question to, and I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer at all, because the disarmament world is very excited about this win, especially the Hibakusha. You've given them an outlet. But I asked the U.S. ambassador on Friday about this win and what it means for the Ban Treaty, and he told me it will have no practical impact on nuclear disarmament. It will not reduce nuclear weapons stockpiles by one single weapon. So how do you counteract this argument, and what does the Nobel Peace Prize win give to you in terms of moving forward on this agenda, and how will you change the minds of the other P5, and especially what will you do with umbrella nations like Japan, as Tim mentioned? How can you hook into this and change things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shana. Well, it's quite expected that they would say that. And this is something we've heard from the beginning. The humanitarian conferences doesn't matter. The work of all these other states doesn't matter. The work of civil society doesn't matter. Clearly it matters. And I think that their protests against this shows that it does have an impact on them. But frankly, of course, a Nobel Peace Prize isn't going to make Trump give up nuclear weapons. But I don't think that's really what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is make nuclear weapons unacceptable in the mindsets of people, and that's where civil society has the power. That's really what is changing things. And in the end, governments have to do what their people say. This gives us an enormous opportunity to reach out to new audiences and to mobilize people once again. For quite a long time, nuclear weapons have been seen as an issue of the past, something that is no longer relevant. And late developments recently, that started a few years ago with a potential new nuclear arms race, all the nuclear arms states modernizing, and these direct threats of using nuclear weapons, causing a potential catastrophic humanitarian disasters, slaughtering hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. That's what they're threatening with. Makes this an urgent issue again, and I think that this Nobel Peace Prize can really bring about a much bigger movement against nuclear weapons. And I think we also have to remember that in times of big crises before, have we also made the most progress? It was after the Cuban Missile Crisis that the Tlatelolco Treaty was negotiated, and later also the NPT. It was during the 80s, between the huge tensions between the United States and Soviet, that the Reykjavik meeting happened. And the whole nuclear freeze movement produced really results. So I think that these crises also brings about public mobilization. I think that that's where this Peace Prize is extremely timely and very urgently needed attention on this issue. If you want to add something.
Yeah, do you mind if I do? Is that okay? Just to add quickly to what Beatrice said, I think also when we approached this treaty in the very beginning with our government partners, the idea was always that it would have a normative effect, a legal effect, a political effect, and an economic effect. And we're going to see that happen over time. Of course, nothing will happen immediately. Nuclear weapons aren't just going to magically disappear. But what's going to happen over time is what we've seen happen with, for example, landmines or cluster munitions, which have been banned now for some time. And what we're seeing is even countries that initially objected to the negotiation of those treaties have joined. And even those that haven't since joined are still more or less abiding by their provisions and coming every year more and more in compliance with those treaties, even if they haven't actually joined onto them officially. So I think that we will see those types of impacts happen over the years. And I think also the economic side of this is going to be very significant. There's already divestment campaigns underway where banks and other financial institutions are withdrawing money from nuclear weapon producers. And I think that the Nobel Peace Prize going to ICANN is going to really get the word out about campaigns like that and other initiatives that people around the world can do themselves to contribute to nuclear disarmament.
Thank you. If I just can add from a member state's perspective, is that we didn't have any illusion that the nuclear weapon states would join from day one. But what we really believe is that this treaty is filling a legal gap and is able to delegitimize and even stigmatize the last weapon of mass destruction, which is still on Earth, not outlawed. No one of these prohibition treaties was universal from the very beginning. Not even the Non-Proliferation Treaty was universal. And I always like to remind nuclear weapon states who now say that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is the only agreement which should be around, that even nuclear weapon states, they took them over 2 decades to join this treaty. So we are patient. We wait for them to join us. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and congratulations, Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. One follow-up question. when are you hoping to have the 50 ratifications? The climate treaty took effect very, very quickly. Are you hoping that this is going to spur the nuclear ban treaty taking effect? And secondly, part of the elephant in the room is North Korea. And I wonder if ICANN has any North Korean members. Have you tried to reach out to them, to the government? What exactly have you done or are you planning to do? Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've looked a little bit at other weapons prohibitions and how long it took to get them to 50 ratifications, and I think it's been about 1.5 to 2 years. So our ambitious goal is before the end of 2018, I think, to get 50 ratifications. But it depends really on member states. So we have 3 member states here who needs to ratify, so get going. In terms of North Korea, no, obviously we do not have members in North Korea. They are not a country where civil society can work freely and engage, which makes that very, very difficult. But I think that these kind of treaties still impact that kind of states. No one is really immune towards international norms. It does mean, I mean, we here in North Korea, here at the United Nations, needing to defend themselves, needing to argue why they're doing what they're doing. And they're doing that because there's a certain expectations that you don't do that. We see in other issues as well, countries that perhaps aren't recognized in certain norms still have to engage in a discussion about them. So I think it does have an impact anyway. And what we do know is that it will be impossible to get North Korea to disarm as long as we think that nuclear weapons are acceptable. When we say that nuclear weapons are acceptable and absolutely necessary, like the nuclear armed states and many umbrella states say, for security, North Korea is always going to want them and always going to see it as legitimate and justified. And I think that that is what this treaty is about. Stop allowing them to justify having weapons of mass destruction that are only meant to indiscriminately slaughter hundreds of thousands of civilians.
Anybody else? Please, I'll do the first row and then...
Thank you very much. Congratulations for all your hard work. This is Ahmed Fadi from American Television News. A follow-up on Edith's question and go further than North Korea, the Middle East. There was a proposal at the IAEA, and it even got the votes, but for some reason they have to submit it annually, to make the Middle East a free zone of nuclear weapons. Up till today, we have a known yet secret nuclear power in the Middle East that still does not want to even enter into the NPT and accept the verification process in that treaty. How does ICANN going to modify its raison d'etre after achieving the reaching of to a treaty and expanding more into different parts of the world and dealing with it in a more regional approach? Since North Korea is a case, the Middle East is another case. Thank God South America is a free zone of nuclear weapons. But what will be your next move in that track? Thank you.
The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is, in a sense, a global nuclear weapon-free zone. So we'll certainly be urging all nations in the Middle East to join it, to declare their unequivocal rejection of nuclear weapons. And we believe that this will strengthen norms in that region against such weapons. We'll also be working around the world with regional organisations such as the African Union, ASEAN, Pacific Islands Forum to encourage those groups collectively to pursue signature and ratification of the treaty. We have, as Beatrice said, campaigners in more than 100 countries. Many of these countries are nuclear-free countries, so we'll be looking to them as potential early signatories of the treaty. There are obviously, getting a country like Israel to sign this treaty will be far more challenging, but this is about establishing the strong global norm and saying that these are unacceptable weapons. And until now, there was no treaty globally to convey that message.
I'm sorry, a follow-up.
Clarification. If you allow me, I just would like to add that's not South America that's free of nuclear weapons. It's Latin America and the Caribbean. It's an organization of 34 states from all Caribbean states, and Latin America from Mexico to the south of Latin America. So it's a large organization. The Secretary General of this organization is here in the room. He's going to speak at the first commission in the coming days, and we are supportive of other nuclear-free zone areas and treaties, and of course one in the Middle East. Thank you.
Excuse me, a follow-up. You mentioned you're going to hope to urge Israel, etc. I did not mention Israel by name, but since you brought it, we have a nuclear deal treaty with Iran that it is in danger, in peril right now. And yet we cannot, I don't know for how long they can keep the lid on the other Middle Eastern countries from developing their own nuclear programs in order to make a balance in the force, in the power in that sensitive region. What is exactly ICANN can do? And do you have presence in these countries in the Middle East where you're trying to hope to make them join? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the problem with only focusing on non-proliferation. Because if you don't address the underlying problem with nuclear weapons, if some countries can still have it, you are going to be unable to prevent every single state in the world forever from developing nuclear weapons. We can't force any one country to disarm. Countries will disarm when they think it's in their interest. What we're trying to do with this treaty is to make it in their interest to disarm. We've seen over time, like Ray mentioned, chemical and biological weapons, landmines, cluster munitions, were once seen as okay weapons to have. And states were happy to have them, proud to have them. It wasn't anything difficult, strange with that. And suddenly they were prohibited by treaties. And it became difficult. And they started making other choices. Some of them because of the treaty and said it straightforwardly, sign it. Some of them don't sign them, but still make changes. So I think that this is also how we approach it in the Middle East. We can't prevent states from wanting nuclear weapons forever. We have to make nuclear weapons unwanted.
Just from a member state's perspective again, the Middle East zone free of weapons of mass destruction, so that goes beyond nuclear weapons, is part of the NPT action plan of 2010. And one of the failures of the 2015 review conference is that there was no progress on this issue. And because there was no progress on Article 6 of the NPT, meaning that nuclear weapon states took up upon themselves to disarm. So we haven't seen this, and this frustration has also led to this ban treaty which came about. And since you mentioned it, the JCPOA on Iran, we Europeans are very clear. We think there is no justification to decertify, and it will be also harmful and self-defeating. If you want to control non-proliferation, then this will send a totally wrong message. Thank you. Yeah.
Carla Stay, Global Research. I raised the issue, it seems as though the largest number of nuclear weapons owned are by the US, the UK, and France at the Troika. And I did raise the issue at the time when your meetings were being held, whether one of them, who was giving a press conference, would be coordinating with you. And they said no, they were working in Geneva with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which permits them to own nuclear weapons. And I discussed this at length with Ambassador Sergio Duarte, the wording of the NPT, which is so vague that it can be misconstrued or distorted so that my country, which is the United States, feels entitled to it. And I know that the NPT is hated by a number of developing countries. And frankly, I'm very sympathetic with that. So what can you do to change this feeling of entitlement or this assertion of entitlement by the countries that own the most? And I do have to make a follow-up comment. I did study the Security Council statements by North Korea in 2006 when they said they would not need a single nuclear weapon if the United States wasn't constantly threatening them with nuclear weapons. So how do you transform the NPT so it's not seen as a license to own nuclear weapons?
Thanks very much. Well, we see that as a deliberate misinterpretation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and it's one that is only interpreted that way by the 5 nuclear-armed states that are part of that treaty. No other party to the treaty believes that they do have that right to possess nuclear weapon. And Article 6 of the treaty is extremely clear that they are legally obligated to get rid of their nuclear arsenals. This idea of good faith negotiation of nuclear disarmament requires them to eliminate their nuclear weapons. And that was part of the bargain for why non-nuclear armed states joined this treaty in the first place. It was that they would not acquire nuclear weapons, and those that already had them at the time of the treaty's negotiation would get rid of them. So that's the real and accurate interpretation and reading of the NPT. That is what is in line with the letter and the spirit of the treaty. And I think what Beatrice said here about the effects of the Prohibition Treaty, of what that can have, we can't change the NPT's wording to make it more crystal clear or to double down on this. We can't change that treaty. But what we've done is negotiate a categorical prohibition of nuclear weapons that makes it clear that these weapons are illegal, are unacceptable. And the states that did that see this as part of their implementation of their Article 6 obligations, because Article 6 isn't just for the nuclear armed states, it's for all states that are party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And most of those countries did participate in these negotiations in good faith and reach this agreement collectively. So I think we can see it having an impact on the NPT that way, through the behavior of the states parties of that treaty.
The US, the UK, and France, as I'm sure you know, stating they did not join your treaty and have no intention of ever joining the treaty. How do you deal with such a tantrum?
Well, I think one thing that's important there is to note that these are democratic countries, so it's ultimately going to need to be up to the people of those countries as to whether or not they ever sign this treaty. I think it's a bit of a short view for them to take. These current administrations may not be willing to sign these treaties, but we are seeing administrations change around the world all the time. So I don't know that that's really an accurate statement that they can make.
Please. No.
Thanks. Matthew Lee, Intercity Press, on behalf of the Free UN Closed for Access. Thanks a lot for this for the briefing. I wanted to ask a previous Nobel Peace Prize winner. The Pugwash conferences had this event about hosting nuclear weapons, about the countries that host other countries' nuclear weapons. And I wanted to know whether I think Brazil was maybe a co-sponsor or a host of it. But is there some? How does this impact? I think there's 5 countries in Europe that host U.S. tactical nuclear weapons. How does signing or not signing it impact that? And there's another, at least I think, elephant in the room, which is another previous Nobel Peace Prize winner, Aung San Suu Kyi. Many people are saying that she should return the prize, or the prize should be taken back given the events in Rakhine State and with the Rohingya. And as an incoming Nobel Peace Prize winner, do you guys have any thoughts of either provisions for withdrawal or just the situation in Myanmar? Thank you.
I'll make a comment on the host nations. So there are 5 countries in Europe that currently host US nuclear weapons on their soil: Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons offers a very clear pathway for those nations to accede. They would be required to remove the weapons within a particular timeline and according to particular conditions to be agreed. We have very strong campaigns in most of those countries. We have many parliamentarians who have pledged to work for the signature and ratification of this treaty by those countries. So we are confident that in the reasonably near future, a number of those current nations hosting nuclear weapons will join this treaty.
Just quickly on the issue of Myanmar. ICAN is a campaign focused on nuclear weapons, so we have never really made statements on other issues. And I think it's a bit too early for us to reflect on what it means to be a Nobel Prize winner at this time and in the wider sense of these issues. But obviously we're a campaign that is fully committed to human rights, humanitarian law, follow humanitarian international law to 100%. So yeah, that's all I can say about that issue.
Thank you. Is that me? Right. Thank you. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I want to follow up with the question of my colleague Ahmed Fathi. And first, I want to congratulate you for this great prize. It gives civil society so much energy and motivation. Like Judy William in 1997, the Tunisian trade unions like Medsa Sans Frontières, and that really motivate so many other civil society to continue with their work. My question again is about Israel. I always see that when it comes to nuclear countries, you are vocal and blunt, talking about the nuclear programs of the 5 permanent members, North Korea, the intentions of Iran. But most of those advocacy groups are silent when it comes to Israeli nuclear programs. Do you have in your literature anything about that? Do you have any campaign to talk about Israeli nuclear program? Do you have any advocacy programs around the world that includes Israel? I want to see more advocacy, more vocal voices speaking against the nuclear arsenal of Israel. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a remarkable campaign team in Israel. It's very small, but they're making some progress. And there was a case recently brought before the Supreme Court of Israel to try to expose the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons and to begin more of a public conversation on that. We've also managed through the Israeli disarmament movement to have some discussions in the Knesset for the first time. So, small steps forward, but important steps. And I hope that this Nobel Peace Prize will help our Israeli campaigners in their work. The more that we can talk about this openly, I think the more likely it is that we will see progress. In all of our literature, we certainly refer to Israel as a country with nuclear weapons. I think there's no doubt whatsoever about that. And we have also encouraged governments to speak openly about that as well.
Thank you. My name is Khosrow Shayesta with IRNA, Iranian News Agency, and with congratulations. My question is the continuation of Mr. Fathi's question regarding the JCPOA. 2 years ago, in an international effort, an agreement was signed, which was a great step towards proliferation efforts. Now it is said that the U.S. administration is planning to pull out of that agreement. I want to know how would this, in your view, affect the credibility of such efforts, which the nuclear agreement is one of the examples. In the future, is it not going to have adverse effects in the mind of those who think, all right, an agreement was made, and so easily one part of that agreement is coming out of it? Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, we've heard lots of reports lately about the possible intention of the U.S. government to decertify this deal and thereby threatening it and causing more conflict, which is really not what the world needs right now. I think it would have a lot of negative impact if that would happen, and I think it would be. We see no evidence that Iran isn't complying with it. Instead, everyone, the IAEA and all the other partners of this deal say that Iran is complying with it. So we really call on the U.S. government to continue certify and stay in this deal to avoid causing any more conflict or tension.
Thank you, Ambassador. Evelyn Leopold, Huffington Post contributor, and I'll add my congratulations to your Nobel Prize. I'm going to ask something very naive, but how many bombs does it take to blow up the world? And how do Russia and the United States, with close to 7,000, how is that in any way justified, considering that you don't need that many to do what you have to do? I know it's a naive question, but every time I see that list of nuclear weapon states, that number is so outrageous on both countries.
Well, there's certainly no justification for having thousands of nuclear weapons. There's no justification for having any nuclear weapons whatsoever. In terms of your question about how many it would take to destroy the world, there's been some research in recent years on the effects of so-called limited nuclear exchange involving 100 or so Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons, which would be within the capacity of, for example, the Indian and Pakistani nuclear arsenals. And that research has shown that there would be widespread famine that could result in up to 2 billion deaths. Clearly there are many times more nuclear weapons in the world than would be needed to destroy the entire planet. The 3 conferences on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons held in Oslo, Nayarit and Vienna provided much of this important evidence about the immediate and long-term impacts of nuclear detonations, which was really the impetus for the negotiations on this treaty.
Can I just add something? I just wanted to share some information, facts that I read the other day that still, despite working on this issue for a long time, gets me shocked. And it's from the Union of Concerned Scientists that put together this graphic of the U.S. arsenal, where one American nuclear weapons-armed submarine has the explosive power of 7 World War IIs on it. And there are 10 of these, patrolling the world at the same time. We're talking about 70 World War IIs on our seas right now. And that's just the United States. And then you have 8 other nuclear-armed states as well. And just thinking about that and the unacceptability of having that kind of power and how individuals in those states have the ability to launch these weapons and they're targeted. They're not meant for military objects. 70 World War IIs, the explosive power of 70 World War IIs are not meant for military targets. It's meant to wipe out civilization. Sorry.
I participated in the Vienna conference, and it really blows your mind. We were just so damn lucky that nothing has happened. And nuclear weapons are a threat to humanity. It is not just that it is something, well, if it being dropped somewhere in the Far East, what does it concern me? It is a threat to the whole of humanity, as is climate change. And if we don't do anything about it, we are blindly going into catastrophe. The lady? No, you, yeah.
Thank you. Ariana King with Nikkei. Congratulations on your win. So I know you've already touched upon the pushback from the nuclear weapon states who say that this won't, reduce the nuclear stockpiles at all. But just specifically, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee themselves in their statement said the Norwegian Nobel Committee is aware that an international legal prohibition will not in itself eliminate a single nuclear weapon. The use of the word aware seems to imply that this is a fact. I'm wondering your response to that specific issue from the statement. And on a separate issue, just have you seen any pressure since the ban treaty was adopted, on states that maybe participated in the negotiations but haven't yet signed or ratified from the nuclear weapon states? Thank you.
So the treaty provides a pathway for accession by nuclear-armed nations. If a nuclear-armed nation were to join, which we expect them to do at some point in the future, an additional agreement would need to be negotiated, setting out the circumstances or the parameters within which they would pursue the dismantlement of their nuclear arsenal. So in that sense, the weapons would be eliminated under the treaty or the associated protocols. So I think that we wouldn't agree fully with the comment made by the Norwegian Nobel Committee in that regard. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's good.
I dare say something about pressure on states. Yes, there is pressure on states. There's pressure on states even like Austria, which is known to be very stubborn in this respect. There pressure on states not to sign. There was pressure not to participate. And there are even veiled or not so much veiled threats. But I hope that this Nobel Peace Prize will give an encouragement to those countries and say, okay, it is recognized that this is the right thing to do, and they will join us. Please.
Well, I guess I'll raise another elephant in the room, which may partly answer Evelyn's question. The U.S. is investing $1 trillion in upgrading nuclear weapons. And Jonathan Granoff sent me something from I believe it was Albuquerque or Santa Fe, where Northrop Grumman and Raytheon were thrilled about this because the bottom line is it's immensely profitable to invest in weapons. And according to a 1936 book called The Merchants of Death, what's even more profitable than investing in weapons is war. And DuPont made 1,000% more profit in World War I. So how do you deal with economies that are based upon profit maximization? And this is a quick fix? I mean...
I think the treaty prohibits production and development of nuclear weapons. So countries that sign it cannot be a part of producing them. And it also prohibits assistance with those acts, which means that countries who sign it cannot assist with the production and development of nuclear weapons. And in a lot of other treaties, this has been interpreted to include also financing. And we have this great report that one of our partner organizations is doing, Don't Bank on the Bomb, which is an overview of which banks and financial institutions, so banks and pension funds and etc., that invests in nuclear weapons and which ones don't. So everyone can go and look at where is my money? Is my money going to be lent out to nuclear weapons producers? And then take action. And we've had great success and lots of banks that have, taken decisions to divest from nuclear weapons production even before the treaty. And now, obviously, we have the treaty. And just on the same day as the treaty opened for signature on 20th of September, the first American bank that we know of announced that it has a policy to not invest in nuclear weapons, which we were very excited about. Kathleen?
Amalgamated.
Amalgamated. Yeah. So very, very excited about that. And that campaign will only grow stronger. And that's really where some of the power in this lies, in the money. And we have the power to withhold that kind of money now from weapons producers. And we saw just last year, just a few, 6-7 years after the Cluster Munitions Convention entered into force, the last American cluster munitions producer, Textron, decided to stop producing cluster munitions because there was no market for it anymore and a growing international stigma. But in the positive news to their investors, they announced that, well, this opens us up for more investments for all the banks that have blacklisted us because of this prohibited weapon that we produce. So I think that there is clear signs that treaty prohibitions have an impact, even if the nuclear armed states, if the states with the weapons don't sign on to it.
Then I would thank you very much for attending. I thank ICANN and congratulations again, and looking forward to many more years of achieving the goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. Thank you.